stirring things up, and the extra cloud in the sky. Showers continue and longer spells of rain in places as we start off Wednesday. Storm Barra still centred over the UK, but by this stage it's filling, so it's becoming less windy. However, still the risk of gales for parts of South Wales into southwest England and wind gusts of 65 miles per hour. And it's going to be a very unsettled day with showers and longer spells of rain moving through at times. Western Scotland, southeast England seeing fewer showers, but for most it's rain on and off throughout much of the day, and further hill snow across northern parts of the UK. Eventually, through Wednesday evening, the weather begins to quieten down. The winds start to tone down a little. And Thursday, still a few showers around, especially in the east, but drier and brighter weather arrives in the west for a time.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday. You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM. Over the next hour, we'll be live at the Foreign Affairs Select Committee with the latest on those shocking whistleblower claims of civil service chaos during the drawdown from Afghanistan. We'll also have the latest on Storm Barra, including talking to an MP whose constituents are still being affected by the last storm, and PCR testing consumers. We'll speak to a boss who thinks we're all being ripped off. That and so much more in the next hour. But first, at 3, is the news with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, I'm Rosie Wright, and this is your news at 3 o'clock. Yellow warnings for wind and snow are in place across almost all of the country as Storm Barra hits. Winds of almost 70 miles per hour have been recorded off the southwest coast of England. The storm's also caused flooding in southwest Ireland. In Western Scotland and northwest England, drivers have been warned of potentially hazardous conditions. Our home editor, Mark White, is in one of the affected regions in Scotland where Storm Barra is hitting.
We're in the heart of the Scottish borders on the A7 trunk route between Carlisle and Edinburgh, and Storm Barra has arrived. It's snowing pretty heavily now, and the added hazard are the winds, which are really whipping up now and likely to cause significant drifting on the higher routes.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson is warning the new COVID variant Omicron is more transmissible than the Delta strain. It comes as 101 new Omicron cases have been confirmed in the UK, taking the total confirmed number to now 437. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is encouraging people in Scotland to work from home as cases there have risen by 11% in the past week. A Whitehall whistleblower has accused the government of costing lives in its evacuation of people from Afghanistan. Raphael Marshall worked for the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. He says just 5% of Afghans who asked the UK to help them flee the country as it fell to the Taliban actually received assistance. He also claims some of those left behind were killed. However, the Prime Minister has defended the evacuation efforts of the Foreign Office.
Still an astonishing thing to get 15,000 people airlifted out of Kabul in pretty harrowing circumstances. And of course, as you know, we continue to have the Afghan resettlement scheme to help people to whom we owe obligations and who may be leaving Afghanistan in fear of their lives.
Airport-style security is going to be installed in all new prisons as part of a government crackdown on drugs. It's a zero-tolerance, they say, approach in England and Wales, and it's going to see body scanners, biometric identification and sniffer dogs used on both visitors and staff to try and keep dangerous substances out of jails. And prisoners will be assessed on arrival for drug and alcohol addiction.
Young people, and it's almost invariably young men, end up in prison. That cannot be a dead end for them. And we want to stop the drugs coming in, so we're putting in a lot of money for scanners, but we also want them to come out with more qualifications and more self-esteem about their chances in the future.
COVID has affected children in the northeast more than anywhere else in the country, and that's left them more disadvantaged in health and education. The new research called Child of the North found those children have a 27% chance of living in poverty compared to a 20% chance in the rest of England. Speaking to GBNews, Professor Kate Pickett said there were many factors involved.
Because they had more risk factors for poor outcomes prior to the pandemic, and because they actually experienced longer lockdowns than children in much of the rest of the country, those poor outcomes have been exacerbated. So some of it's due to poverty and family livelihoods being lost. Some of it is due to loss of schooling. Some of it is due to mental health problems. But COVID-19 has exacerbated the north-south divide that we were already experiencing for our children in the north.
Long-serving Labour MP Harriet Harman has announced she's stepping down at the next election. She's Britain's longest-serving female Member of Parliament and was first elected in 1982. She's known as the mother of the House of Commons. She served in numerous cabinet and shadow cabinet positions, including Leader of the House of Commons under Gordon Brown. Well, in a tweet making the announcement this morning, she said it had been an honour to represent Camberwell and Peckham for almost 40 years. We'll be keeping you up to date across the afternoon and evening here on GB News. Now, back to the briefing, though, with Darren McCaffrey.
Well, hello and welcome to the Briefing PM, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey, and coming up over the next hour, we're going to be live in Parliament at that Foreign Affairs Select Committee following those allegations from a whistleblower. What are the details and how much political pressure is there now on the former Foreign Secretary and current Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab? Also, Storm Barra. Well, we know that it is not looking good for many parts of the country. We'll be speaking to an MP whose area was affected by the last storm as concerns grow about what may well happen overnight tonight. And are PCR producers profiting from the pandemic? I'll speak to a testing company boss who's calling for the government to crack down on firms that mislead travellers and continually change their prices. As always on GB News, we want to hear what you've got to say, so do send me your views and emails. gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. A very good afternoon. Welcome to the programme. Yeah, thank you very much for your company. Well, first up, a whistleblower has accused the Foreign Office of being chaotic during the Kabul evacuation. Civil servants were slammed from working from home during the crisis and allegedly ignored hundreds of emails. In referred evidence to the Foreign Affairs Committee, Raphael Marshall said up to 150,000 Afghans who were at risk because of the links to Britain applied to be evacuated, but only 5% received any assistance. Well, the committee has just started in the House of Commons, so let's have a dip in and listen to what's been said.
We work with them alongside other civilians. No one wanted our engagement and our presence in Afghanistan to end in the way that it did. I'm sure you'll get on to Chair what came about and why it came about. We had seen the eventual Taliban takeover of Afghanistan as the most likely outcome of the NATO withdrawal. That was our central assessment, as you know, but no one, including the Taliban themselves, foresaw the speed that happened. Our main effort was to try and avoid that happening and to secure a better outcome, some sort of negotiated power sharing deal. But we also worked in parallel on our contingency plans and accelerated those as time passed after the US decision had been confirmed by President Biden in April. We were looking at an alternative diplomatic presence. We were also working up our contingency planning for a military evacuation. It was, for us as a department, but also I think across government, one of the most complex and challenging crises we've had to face for the short period that we were evacuating people. And we did, as you know, successfully, enabled by the military who were on the ground providing security, but alongside our Home Office and Border Force colleagues, evacuate more than 15,000 people, but we all wish we could have evacuated more. Everyone involved, those on the ground under Solori's leadership, I'm sure the military, all of the people working at the UKN, wish we got more out than we were able to in the time we had. But that work carries on now, and since the end of the evacuation period, we've helped more than 3,000 people to leave Afghanistan who have entitlement to come to the UK. Final thing to say, Chair, again, I think you'll come on to this, is, as with all big crises, there are lessons to be learned, and we're in the process of doing that as a department, and I'm happy to go through that with you in the committee in response to your questions later on. But that's a slightly long answer, because how I would basically describe my feelings about what happened.
Okay, so what stage did you understand the full extent of the challenge?
So I think all along we were hardening up our assessment of what was going on as time passed. I think it depends what you mean by the full extent of the challenge. I think when we first saw the Doha deal back in 2020, we recognised that potentially was problematic. We engaged, both with our US and other NATO partners, but also as the UK independently, and the last Foreign Secretary talked about this when he gave evidence to you in September, in trying to ensure there was a peace process, which meant there was a withdrawal of the NATO military presence, which didn't lead to an outcome which wasn't in our interests. While we did that, we were, as I say, developing our plans, early planning under NSC direction, to basically achieve as much as we could for the UK and our interests, particularly keeping the UK safe in our counter-terrorism effort. While stepping up our planning, I think April was the point at which we knew that US policy was fixed, and that President Biden had ratified, if you like, the date. And we then were looking, including with the US, at how we could maintain our presence, as I said, what I think was called the Diplomatic Assurance Platform, while doing our contingency planning. I think as you move through April into May and the G7, the NATO summit and the G7 summit, that was the point at which we had assurance that there was the potential for sufficient US, I think there was also Turkish possibility to actually allow us to maintain a diplomatic presence, and then we carried on our planning after that.
I'm going to interrupt you, Sir Philip, and ask, how many people did you estimate you'd need to evacuate when you got to the point in April where you realised an evacuation was going to be likely?
At that point, we were focused on our continuing presence. We had a central assessment around...
Did you not have any estimate at all of how many people you might need to evacuate?
I asked Nigel to come in a bit on the actual planning process, but over the period of April through to... from April the 21st, April the 14th onwards, that's when the decision was taken. From April the 21st, Joint Force Headquarters carrying out reconnaissance about what Operation Pitting, as it became known as, might look like. We then stepped up our engagement through May and June, including with with PGHQ harden up our planning. But Nigel, would you like to say a little bit about the numbers behind that contingency planning?
Thank you. To answer your question, Chair, we estimated that on the basis of historic data, passport issues, that there were something like 3,000 British nationals, British passport holders still in Afghanistan in April. It's one of the reasons that we, at that point, changed our travel advice to strengthen it, to encourage everyone to consider leaving, and that there were at least 4,000 people potentially eligible for the ARAP programme who remained to be put through the programme and taken out. And at that point, the plan, as you know, was to get them through the process out to the UK and resettle in advance of any potential need for an evacuation.
Okay, so you're talking of a total of 7,000. So are you surprised by the figures that have been given to us by Mr. Marshall of between 75,000 and 150,000 people who applied for refuge in the UK?
So I think it's important at this point to distinguish between what we're talking about. There were, in the end, 3 ways in which people were evacuated. So were those under the ARAP scheme, led by the Ministry of Defence with the Home Office. They were British nationals, and then there was a decision to bring special cases, as they were known, of which were additional in a sense to our original planning assumption. There was never an application process, so I don't recognise that the very large numbers you were talking about. The numbers we had in our minds were the ARAP scheme, the British nationals, and then a decision when we realised we had capacity, we bring some of the most vulnerable, which we did.
So when did you agree what the conditions were to be counted as a special case?
Sorry, Chair, I missed your question.
When did you agree the conditions that would allow somebody to be counted as a special case? When did you set the policy?
That decision was taken as Afghanistan was taken over by the Taliban, when we had the plans in place and we knew that there would be spare capacity beyond those entitled under ARAP and as British nationals or their dependents. We looked at who else, and ministers took the decision to add the special cases, as it were.
Okay, so in April there was no intention, for example, to offer special assistance to Afghan judges who had sat on narcotics trials under British support.
There was the ARAP scheme, and that was the scheme under which people who had helped us could be brought to the UK.
Sure, but narcotics judges in the special narcotics courts wouldn't have counted, for example.
So the ARAP scheme was administered by the MOD. There were criteria for those.
Yes, and the judges wouldn't have counted as part of that ARAP scheme.
But if they were not directly employed or weren't working closely enough, they'd be assessed under the scheme whether or not they would or not be.
So would members of the National Directorate of Security who held in their minds the secrets?
There we go. That's officials answering questions at the Foreign Affairs Committee. Tom Tugendhat asking those questions, chair of that committee on the drawdown from Afghanistan earlier this summer, which a whistleblower has branded as chaotic. Allegations including that only 5% of the 150,000 people who'd applied actually received any help. Also allegations that no one spoke any of the Afghan languages, with calls to people asking for help conducted in English, that many emails simply went unanswered, and that Dominic Raab, who was the then Foreign Secretary, was slow to make decisions on difficult cases and did not fully understand the situation. Those questions not being put to Dominic Raab, but to officials, very senior officials within his department. Let's cross over now to Westminster and speak to Richard Holden. He is a Conservative MP for Durham North West. Good afternoon to you, Richard. I know we're going to talk to you about the dreadful weather situation that we've seen across your constituency and elsewhere in the UK. But can I just ask you, first of all, while we've got you, I mean, these are pretty damning allegations from this whistleblower. And it's not the first allegations about Dominic Raab's role in all of this. How much political pressure do you think he should be under?
Well, I think, one of the things we've got to look at is the fact that we got so many people out of Afghanistan so quickly. The biggest airlift I think we've ever done as a country. So we did do a huge amount there, and there's nothing against the guys there on the ground who went out to go and get our people. I think there are obviously broader questions to be asked, and I'll be supporting more broadly around the Afghan resettlement. I think it's vital that those who did help our country are able to come to the UK and through those routes. But at a very difficult time, I think the UK did a huge amount in very, very difficult circumstances.
OK, well, Richard, it looks pretty awful there outside Parliament. It's pretty awful across much of the country, and Storm Barra really hasn't properly hit most of the UK already today. We are expecting that pretty much in the next couple of hours. Millions having a nervous night ahead. I know that you obviously represent a constituency along with others that have essentially not had power for a long period of time after the last storm. Storm Arwen more than 10 days ago. Just give us a sense of the concerns that your constituents and others have that, this is a second storm coming that could cause further disruption.
No, well, there's obviously apprehension in constituencies like mine in northwest Durham. There's still parts of my constituency, Medhamsley, one of the villages there, which is still struggling to get power as we speak, still struggling to get those electricity supplies reconnected. And there's still many parts of the most rural areas of my constituency still on generators. I would say that the engineers from Northern Power Grid have been working around the clock, as well as really good efforts from local community organisations and the council to help out. But it is a real concern, especially with that extra snowfall, possibly delaying some of that move from generators back to mains electricity supply that my constituents could really do with at the moment to enable them to, just go back to their normal lives as quickly as possible. So it is a real concern.
It is a concern, and obviously accusations being made against Northern Power Grid about its reaction and others. And we know the government have sent the army up there, but there is a sense, and we were speaking to local councillors this week and journalists, that if this was elsewhere in the country, the response, particularly from the government, would have been a hell of a lot stronger. This sense that actually the further you are away from London, the slower or the greater the disinterest from governments.
Well, look, these are questions I was raising very start of last week in Parliament, really pushing for that government reaction. And in fairness to the government, I had government ministers up not just last week, but the Secretary of State over the weekend in my constituency. I think there are broader questions to be asked of Northern Power Grid. I'm glad that Ofgem and BEIS are doing a joint review into what happened, because we really cannot be in a situation in modern Britain where people are left, for 10 days plus without mains electricity. It's just not acceptable, because there are so many vulnerable people out there, particularly in isolated parts of the community. And then when you've got Storm Barra coming as well, with that extra snow cutting people off all over again, we need to be sure that people can have power supplies to their homes. And that's something that I've written about, I've spoken about over the last few days, and I really want to ensure that my constituents get the same level of service as those anywhere else in the country. It's just not acceptable if they don't.
And isn't that the overall point, I suppose, to a degree, that that your government talks about levelling up? Is this a kind of totemic issue in some ways, a sign of how there is that disconnect, and that ultimately it's on issues like this that maybe your constituents and others may judge about whether levelling up is a success in the years to come?
Well, I think nobody can doubt that the level of infrastructure investment we've seen in the north, not just in electricity grid, but in transport, things like that, over the last few decades, haven't been up to scratch. My constituency has no dual carriageway; it's got no railway access either. So there are big issues around historic and systemic, I think, underinvestment there, and that's what I'm fighting for in Westminster, to try and get those funds to level up, to really improve the infrastructure, but also those other areas around jobs, skills, education as well, because this isn't just around one thing, but I think perhaps this shines a spotlight on the broader issues that we're facing across the north of England.
OK, Richard, really appreciate your time, particularly standing out there in a very damp Westminster. Really appreciate that. Richard Bolton there, Conservative MP for Durham West, live from Parliament, talking about that storm. And we will be going to the Scottish borders to join our Home Affairs editor, Mark White, for the very latest on Storm Barra later on in the programme. But now we're going to pause on the briefing this afternoon. We'll be dipping back into that Foreign Affairs Select Committee, bringing you up to date with the latest lines emerging from there. Plus, PCR testing. We know we'll have to do it if we want to get back into the UK. But one boss thinks the government should be doing more to keep the costs down. We'll be talking to him, so much more, in just a couple of minutes. But first, here is the weather from the Met Office.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. The worst of Storm Barra's weather is now easing, but the weather stays unsettled during the next 24 hours with further rain or showers and continued gusty winds in many places. You can see Storm Barra, a dartboard area of low pressure which deepened rapidly as it made its way across the Atlantic on Monday and the start of Tuesday, now slowing down and gradually filling, so the worst of its impacts will come down in the next 24 hours, but still the potential for some very unsettled weather overnight. Through the evening, 70 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts possible for parts of Wales and to the Bristol Channel as well. It stays windy in the northeast as well, and showers wrapped around that area of low pressure or longer spells of rain with further hill snow for northern England as well as Scotland. So we start off Wednesday very unsettled with that low still in place. The winds will be coming down through the day, but it's going to take a while, so still the potential for gales for South Wales and southwest England, 65 mile per hour wind gusts. And for northeast Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of western England and Wales, a continuous feed of showers through the day. The weather stays unsettled in many spots. Some drier and brighter interludes towards the east of England, western Scotland, for example. However, all in all, it's an unsettled day. Expect showers, expect gusty winds, and it will feel cool or cold with all of that weather going on. Into Wednesday evening and overnight, we're going to see further showers coming in from that area of low pressure, especially in the east and northeast, and a few coming through to western England, Wales and Northern Ireland. A lot of cloud cover, and with that breeze, temperatures generally holding up overnight, but potential for a chilly start for western Scotland, perhaps one or two spots further south as well. A bright start in these areas, a better chance of sunshine coming through on Thursday morning, and showers gradually easing through the day in many spots. But further rain arrives in the far west towards the end of Thursday. That makes its way across the country on Friday, followed by showers. More rain to come on Saturday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you?
It's Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Well, now for the very latest on Storm Barra that is battering parts of Britain. Let's go to Scotland and join our Home Affairs editor, Mark White, who is braving those rather cold conditions himself. Hat on. We can see your breath as well, Mark, so it is definitely very cold. What is the situation where you are in Hawick?
We're in between the bands of snow, which is something at least, but the wind chill is -5. And there's a strong wind blowing it smack bang into my face, which is making my mouth a little numb and slightly difficult to hold a coherent conversation with you. But effectively, what you have is the main A7, the trunk route that runs from Carlisle up to Edinburgh through the Scottish borders, the towns of Hawick, Selkirk, Galashiels, and the high-lying routes or elements of that route have been hit quite badly by the snow that's fallen so far. It stopped for a bit. There's squally showers that come through, and when they do, because of the winds, it's whipping up and covers the road again before the ploughs can get through to clear it. They're doing a great job, by the way. I've seen a few ploughs on this stretch of road back and forward regularly to try and keep the route open. But there's more of this for the next 2 or 3 hours ahead, just these squally showers coming in combined with the wind. That's what's going to make it that much more difficult for those that are trying to travel on these high-lying routes. And it's not just, of course, the Scottish borders, it's going right up through the southern uplands into the southern highlands as well, and further down, of course, into Cumbria and Yorkshire. You could get snow combined with the winds, making your drive home this evening pretty hazardous.
And the concern, of course, Mark, is that, you know, there and elsewhere, we've seen an awful lot of people who are still recovering from the previous storm. Some of them still not got heating or electricity. We know it's the winter, but there's a sense for the most vulnerable. This is a pretty dangerous time.
Yeah, we've gone beyond the just inconvenient point now. This is a life-threatening event for many of these people who are still cut off and who've been cut off for the better part of 2 weeks, especially with another storm in now with very cold temperatures, high winds. If it wasn't for the fact that, you know, you've got the local authorities, emergency services, lots of local volunteers and good neighbours who are going around to help, often elderly people in rural homes out with the likes of blankets, portable heaters and hot food, they would be in real trouble right now. It is shocking, actually, to believe that they could be going this long in this country with the resources that there is throughout the whole of the United Kingdom electricity network. That, okay, we now have a system, we're told, by the power companies that allows them to call in extra resource at these times. But there are definite questions for Northern Power Grid here as to whether they have actually called in enough in the way of resources to get these homes connected in time. It certainly doesn't seem like it. There may be logical reasons why. It could be homes cut off because of one main event. We're bringing a lot of people in to try to restore that particular power line is going to be counterproductive. You just need to get through it as you get through it. But it's a mighty long time for these people. As I say, it's gone beyond inconvenience, and it is absolutely a threat to life event.
I think there's some 50,000 homes in Ireland, down in the southwest, who are without power, 80-mile-per-hour winds battering there. Mark, thank you very much indeed. Stay safe, stay warm. Get a cup of tea in yourself and get warmed up a little bit there. Mark White joining us from the Scottish borders. Well, let's return to our top story today. That is, of course, what is happening at the Foreign Affairs Committee inside Parliament, where officials from the Foreign Office have been questioned about what happened in the drawdown from Afghanistan in the last couple of minutes, talking about whether essentially the government and the Foreign Office did enough. These are live pictures inside the Commons. One of the officials there saying that they did try to seek as much help as possible for the people there, and that it was always a known unknown in terms of the number of people who might want to leave. Well, let's speak to Darwin Friend. He's from the Taxpayers Alliance and joins us down the line. He's been listening into what's been said in that House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee. What's your sense, Darwin, of where we're at in this? You know, there is these allegations from the whistleblower that, on the surface at least, seem pretty damaging for the government and particularly for the Foreign Office.
Well, thank you very much, firstly, for having me on the show, Darren. And you're right, a number of allegations have been made today by Raphael Marchel to the Foreign Affairs Committee. And some of those concerns are really worrying to taxpayers. For example, one of them was the fact that there was communication difficulties during working from home for civil servants. Now, that needs to be rectified as soon as possible, especially because civil servants aren't going to be expected to be back in the office, for example, 5 days a week for some time still. But fundamentally, I think what the allegations today show is that there's a real skills gap amongst our civil servants. For example, a couple of the other allegations made today were regarding that civil servants didn't have any languages, that didn't speak any Afghan languages. Others were that they had no knowledge about the Afghanistan conflict. And I think this speaks to a wider problem. For example, Dame Kate Bingham, who led the vaccine scheme, made similar criticisms, saying that civil servants didn't have the skills and experience in the science industry. And so I think what we all have to remember at the end of the day is that taxpayers are fundamentally paying for this service and they expect the best possible outcomes from their public officials.
Say that there is politics at play here as well. Allegations specifically aimed at the former Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab about his decision-making process and the delays in that. How much do you think this will play into the potential political damage for Dominic Raab, a man who lost his job, of course, not shortly after those chaotic scenes in Kabul?
I mean, I don't think we'll ever really know the true economic or political costs of the Afghanistan conflict. But I think what we have to use from that is learn from it, really, and actually make some real changes that are going to benefit outcomes in the future. And something that we at the Taxpayers Alliance have proposed is to have a simpler points-based system for appointing officials. And so what that would do would actually get the people into positions at all levels who have experience in the private sector and in other roles that would be specific to the responsibilities. And that would actually end some of the groupthink that we sometimes see, which actually causes some of the issues that we see in these major scandals. And so what I think is that they need to impose that as soon as possible. And hopefully that will improve outcomes, not only for taxpayers, but also for all those involved. Because at the minute, it does seem to be that civil servants are paralysed by process rather than focusing on the opportunities that the best possible outcomes can produce.
Really appreciate that. Darwin Finch there from the Taxpayers Alliance joining us with his thoughts on that Foreign Affairs Committee. We'll bring you, as I say, the lines from that as they emerge. That committee currently taking place in Parliament. OK, we're going to pause there for a second. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, PCR testing. Are you being ripped off? We'll hear from a boss who says you are. But first, let's get the very latest news at just after 3:30. Yes, Simon.
Thank you, Darren. I am Simon Pusey. Here are your latest news headlines. Yellow warnings for wind and snow are in place across almost all of the country as Storm Barra hits. Winds of almost 70 miles per hour have been recorded off the southwest coast of England. The storm has also caused flooding in southwest Ireland. In western Scotland and northwest England, drivers have been warned of potentially hazardous conditions. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is warning the new COVID variant Omicron is more transmissible than the Delta strain. This comes as 101 new cases have been confirmed in the UK, taking the total to 437. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is encouraging people in Scotland to work from home as cases there have risen by 11% in just 1 week. A Whitehall whistleblower has accused the government of costing lives in its evacuation of people from Afghanistan. The junior diplomat Raphael Marshall says fewer than 5% of Afghans who asked for UK help to flee the country actually received assistance. Justice Secretary Dominic Raab has defended the government's handling of the evacuation efforts. Airport-style security is going to be installed in all new prisons as part of government crackdown against drugs. Body scanners, biometric identification and sniffer dogs will all be used on visitors and on staff to try and keep dangerous substances out of jails. Labour says government cuts and mismanagement have meant jails have become awash with narcotics. And children in the north of England are worse off when it comes to health and education more than anywhere else in the country following the pandemic. The new research called Child of the North found children there have a 27% chance of living in poverty compared to 20% in the rest of England. Well, that's it from me for now. I'll have a full update with you at the top of the hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News. Now, the emergence of the Omicron variant has seen the government double down on PCR testing, with new arrivals into the UK having to do a test before they get on a plane or a boat. However, a slew of the cheapest deals on PCR tests have been removed from the government website amid concerns that travellers are being misled by companies advertising low rates, sometimes for less than a quid, but in reality, when they actually go to book it, it's significantly more. Well, joining us to discuss all of this and the implications about whether people are being ripped off is the director of the Laboratory and Testing Industry Organisation, Francis Ingham. Good afternoon to you, Francis. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Are people being ripped off, is the big question?
Some people are, yes, but not by members of the LTIO. What you have basically is a divide between companies that advertise the real price on the Department of Health website and companies that advertise a sort of baiting price on the government website that lure you in, and then you find that you can't book at the price they have advertised. So, for example, you can go there today on the Department of Health website. There is a company offering 30p for a PCR test. You can't possibly book it. To put that into context, the price of a second-class stamp is 66p. The idea that you're going to have a, potentially life-changing, life-saving test for half the price of a stamp, it is absolutely ridiculous, and the government needs to get tough on this.
And the reason that these companies, Francis, are doing it, first of all, we should state these are official companies on the government's website. So when you go through to fill in your PCR form, you find them. And the reason they offer those lower prices, as you say, price bait, is because they go to the top of the queue, don't they, when they do so? Surely the government has to do something about this.
Yeah, there are two problems with the government website, to put it really simply. One is the pricing bit, because there are no safeguards on the price that is advertised being the reality of the price that you can buy it for. The second is the alphabetical bit, where you have loads of companies who rename themselves to get to the top of the alphabet list by putting exclamation marks or punctuation marks, other sort of marks in front, or doing the AA thing so they get to the top. And that's not in the public interest. We face as a country an incredible problem, the biggest challenge since the Second World War in many ways our country has faced. And this website is making things worse. So the government needs to get a grip, get on top of the website and sort it out.
What rights do consumers have in many regards? I mean, we're waiting for the government to do something. We don't know how long that's going to take. They say they are trying to remove these companies. If you feel you have been ripped off, even retrospectively, can you do anything about it?
Very difficult. Depends how you've paid, I suppose, whether it's on a credit card or a debit card. There's the Advertising Standards Authority, of course, that you could maybe have some redress with. The key problem is that the website, these people, excuse me, these people keep being taken down, and the next day they're put back on. And that is a failing of government, pure and simple. If, as a government, you are going to advertise private sector providers of what is now a fundamental service, then you need to make sure it's rigorous and that people aren't being ripped off. So my advice to people would be, have some degree of scepticism about the prices that some of these people are offering. All of our members, for example, and they represent 80% of the COVID testing capacity in the UK. The price they advertise is the price that you pay. And they sign up to an independently adjudicated code of conduct as part of their membership. There are only 14 of them, but that means the price you see is the price you pay, and don't go for a cowboy.
Just finally, though, Francis, there'll be a lot of people watching, and I'm sure you see this on social media and elsewhere, who frankly think this is all a bit of a racket to a degree in terms of the testing. Prices have come down quite a lot, but still for families, it is an expensive old business. What would you say to them that, this is, and these are companies taking advantage of a pandemic, and that in the end, why is the government not doing this? Why are private companies doing it?
I mean, some of those questions you ought to ask to government rather than to me, bluntly. But the reality is that all of our members were established way before COVID began. They have moved their business models at the government's request to deliver a massive amount of PCR testing, so up to 950,000 tests in a week to respond to a global pandemic. Yes, they're private companies, they make a profit. That's what private companies do. So does GBNews, I hope. But they have responded to the government's decisions. And we would just ask the government to monitor its own website and to make it fit for purpose for the general public.
Francis, really appreciate your insights and all of that. That's Francis Ingham, the Director of the Laboratory and Testing Industry Organisation, joining us about those PCR tests. If you've got a strong view in this, do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. Now let's move on. The Immigration and Borders Bill, which the government says aims to modernise UK's migration laws. Well, it's continuing its journey through Parliament today. MPs are expected to vote on it either tonight or tomorrow. But one of the most talked about elements is a new cross-party amendment, which is aiming to bring down the cost of visas for war heroes and veterans from abroad who've served the United Kingdom. Labour's Dan Jarvis and Conservative Johnny Mercer have put forward the amendment to scrap the fees for those with 5 years' service. GB News had the scoop on this story last Friday when Mr Mercer spoke to Isabel Oakeshott about the plan. Let's have a listen in.
And your campaign is entering another phase next week, isn't it? Can you explain what the process is? There's a bill coming up that you're hoping to attach some amendment to?
That's right. So I'm going to put down an amendment to the Immigration and Borders Bill next week, which essentially states that if you serve 5 years, you and your dependents should have your visa fees waived. So pretty basic, pretty clear. It's been Conservative Party policy for a long time. So I'm hopeful my colleagues are going to support it. I suspect the opposition will support it. Everybody knows it's the right thing to do, but no one's quite prepared to take that step over the line and commit to it. So I will try and get the government to do that next week. I don't know what my chance of success will be, but we'll give it a good go.
I mean, these sums of money, whilst they're huge for the individuals concerned, for the government, they're absolute pennies, aren't they? I mean, we're talking, how many people are we talking a year that might want to take advantage of their right to do this?
So you're talking about a very small amount of people. The exact figures the MOD has, but it's less than 900 families a year who are looking to settle here. If you think about those who are coming here illegally at the moment, and you contrast that picture, if you look at how much money it would actually cost to resettle these people versus how much, for example, the British Legion give in their money to supporting those who are going through this process, the money isn't an issue. It's a question of actually, the department's Home Office and the MOD actually sitting down and working out who's going to do it.
There we go. That's Johnny Mercer speaking to Isabel Oakeshott. And, of course, we'll bring you the details of that vote in Parliament when it happens, as I say, either later tonight or tomorrow. And, of course, Isabel Oakeshott is on GB News on Fridays at 12 noon. Now, let's move abroad, because Boris Johnson held talks last night with President Biden and other Western leaders to agree a package of sanctions against Russia should it invade Ukraine. The Prime Minister joined the leaders of Germany, France and Italy to form a joint strategy to impose significant and severe harm on the Russian economy. And that's all before President Joe Biden's high-stake phone call with President Putin, which has just begun. It will be interesting to see what the details of that conversation are. Well, join me now to discuss all of this is the journalist George Bainski, who joins me down the line. Very good afternoon to you, George. Real concern growing, isn't there, here in Western Europe? I'm sure there is in Poland too, about what Russia may well do in the coming weeks about a potential invasion of Ukraine.
Yes, thank you for having me. Of course, we in Poland have some historical experiences with Russia. Therefore, we share concerns whenever we see a build-up of an army very close to us and pretty much in the heart of Europe. I do not think there is a reason to panic yet. I think this is just flexing muscles by Russia. I do not know why this is done. And we're looking at a European neighbor, Ukraine. The only reasons that Putin stated that he was annoyed with was Ukraine buying weapons from the United States and Ukraine willing to join NATO in the future. Ukraine is an independent country and should be able to consider these options, and the fact that there is over 100,000 Russian soldiers, many tanks and heavy weaponry that is so close is worrying indeed.
And I know that you spoke to the Ukrainian ambassador last night. This is a country, of course, that says it will defend itself, but there is a sense that if Russia does go ahead with an invasion, the Ukrainian forces simply will not be able to defeat them, but it will be a very, very bloody war.
Yes, of course. And we had seen a lot of people who died in recent years in Ukraine. So although an invasion perhaps is not imminent at this current moment, we saw parts of Ukraine being taken away. So anything is possible, and the international community should be very strict when it speaks to Russia. I know that President Biden will be speaking later today. Yes, I also spoke to the Ukrainian ambassador to London. They have an excellent ambassador, their foreign minister. He's doing whatever he can to light up this issue and for people to realize that there may be a conflict at some point in the future. And we as the international community, we here in London, in Poland, in Brussels, we should be doing everything possible to de-escalate the situation.
OK, George, really appreciate your thoughts. We'll be keeping across, of course, that phone call between President Biden and Vladimir Putin. Thank you for joining us. OK, well, let's move to Hollywood. We know Nicola Sturgeon's been talking about the latest coronavirus restrictions and the news in Scotland. Let's have a listen in.
And therefore confirm that at our meeting this morning, the Cabinet agreed to keep all of the current protections in place with no immediate changes. Given the very significant risks posed by Omicron and the continuing high and indeed once again rising number of cases in Scotland overall, our judgment is that it would be inappropriate to lift any of the protections currently in place at this time. On the contrary, we agreed that it's vital at this stage to strengthen compliance with all of these existing protections. We also agreed that, in light of the rapidly developing Omicron situation, it was important to keep the need for any additional protections under daily review at this stage, and the importance of doing that will be clear from the latest data, particularly the data I will share shortly on Omicron. Firstly, though, let me quickly summarise the overall situation. After 2 weeks of falling case numbers, the last 7 days have seen a rise in the overall number of cases. Last week I reported that the number of new cases being recorded each day had fallen by 14% over the preceding 7 days. However, in this past week, cases have increased by 11%, and we're currently recording just over 2,800 new cases a day on average. Encouragingly, though, cases in the over 60 age groups have continued to fall in the past week by a further 8%. And there's little doubt, if any doubt, that this reflects the effectiveness of booster vaccines. However, in all age cohorts under 60, cases are rising again. In total, cases amongst under 60s increased by 13% in the past week, and since people under 60 currently account for more than 90% of all cases, that has inevitably driven an increase in the total number of cases recorded. More positively, the number of people in hospital with COVID has fallen further in the past week from 706 to 576, and so has the number in intensive care from 54 to 38. That is, of course, welcome news, but we shouldn't in any way be complacent about that. Firstly, because we know there is always a time lag between rising cases and rising admissions to hospital. And secondly, because the NHS continues to be under very severe pressure from direct COVID pressure, but also from the backlog of work created during the pandemic. On top of all of that, the NHS may soon face additional pressures, for example from flu, as we head further into winter. And there has always been the potential for COVID cases to rise during December, as may now be happening as a result of more people mixing indoors more often. So in any circumstances, we would be concerned about the current high level of cases and the impact this might have on the NHS. But the emergence of the Omicron variant is now an additional and indeed a very significant cause for concern. Public Health Scotland's weekly COVID report will from tomorrow provide more detail on both confirmed and probable Omicron cases in Scotland.
There you go, that was Nicola Sturgeon speaking in Hollywood earlier. That's it from me for today. I'm back tomorrow. Alex is up next. Here's the weather from the Met Office.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. The worst of Storm Barra's weather is now easing, but the weather stays unsettled during the next 24 hours with further rain or showers and continued gusty winds in many places. You can see Storm Barra, a dartboard area of low pressure, which deepened rapidly as it made its way across the Atlantic on Monday and the start of Tuesday. Now slowing down and gradually filling, so the worst of its impacts will come down in the next 24 hours, but still the potential for some very unsettled weather overnight. Through the evening, 70 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts possible for parts of Wales and to the Bristol Channel as well. Stays windy in the northeast as well, and showers wrapped around that area of low pressure, or longer spells of rain with further hill snow for northern England as well as Scotland. So we start off Wednesday very unsettled with that low still in place. The winds will be coming down through the day, but it's going to take a while, so still the potential for gales for South Wales and southwest England, 65 mile per hour wind gusts. And for northeast Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of western England and Wales, a continuous feed of showers through the day. The weather stays unsettled in many spots. Some drier and brighter interludes towards the east of England, western Scotland, for example. However, all in all, it's an unsettled day. Expect showers, expect gusty winds, and it will feel cool or cold with all of that weather going on. Into Wednesday evening and overnight, we're going to see further showers coming in from that area of low pressure, especially in the east and northeast, and a few coming through to western England, Wales and Northern Ireland. A lot of cloud cover, and with that breeze, temperatures generally holding up overnight, but potential for a chilly start for western Scotland perhaps.